The morning mist clung to the battleground like funeral shrouds, and Princess Kestra should have recognized it as an omen. Instead, she urged her warhorse forward, steel singing. As she drew her ancestral blade, the border skirmish had begun, as they always did, swift, brutal, and decisive. What she hadn't expected was the coward's trap waiting beneath the trampled earth. The hidden spike pit opened like a hungry mouth. Her horse screamed as it fell, crushing her legs beneath its weight before the mercy of unconsciousness claimed her. When awareness returned, the battlefield lay silent save for carrion birds picking at the dead. Her retinue had fled, assuming her another casualty of war. Pain shot through her spine as she tried to move. Her legs, once powerful enough to control the finest war horses in the kingdom, lay motionless beneath the cooling corpse of her mount. Panic clawed at her throat as the terrible reality settled in. She was paralyzed, alone, and forgotten. "Your Highness," the voice was soft, uncertain, and entirely unexpected. Kestra turned her head to see a young man approaching carefully through the carnage. He was lean and weathered, with calloused hands and clothes that marked him as a servant. Recognition came slowly through her pain-fogged mind. "Finn," she whispered. The stable boy from her father's castle. She had barely acknowledged his existence. In all the years he'd tended her horses. He knelt beside her, his brown eyes wide with concern. "I saw the battle from the ridge when the others rode away." He swallowed hard. "I couldn't leave you here. You should have," Kestra replied bitterly. "I'm useless now. A crippled princess is worth nothing to anyone." Finn's jaw tightened. With surprising determination, "You're worth something to me." The simple statement hit harder than any enemy blade. Kestra had commanded armies, received tribute from neighboring kingdoms, and been praised by countless courtiers. Yet this servant boy's quiet declaration carried more weight than all their flowery words combined. "I can't feel my legs," she confessed. The admission tearing from her throat like a battle cry turned into a whimper. "Then I'll be your legs," Finn said without hesitation. He began working to free her from beneath the horse, his movements careful but efficient. "There's a cave system in the hills. We can shelter there while you heal." "You don't understand," Kestra protested, though she didn't stop him from helping her. "I may never walk again. I'll be nothing but a burden." Finn paused in his efforts to meet her eyes. "You've never been just a princess to me, Your Highness. You've been the reason I stayed at the castle when I could have run away a dozen times over." The confession shocked her into silence as he fashioned a crude stretcher from broken spears and his own cloak. Kestra found herself studying this young man she'd never truly seen before. His hands moved with practiced skill, and she realized he must have treated injured horses countless times. There was strength in his slight frame, born of years of hard labor. "Why did you stay?" she asked as he carefully transferred her to the makeshift litter. A flush crept up his neck. "Because watching you train in the courtyard was the brightest part of my day. Because you never treated the horses cruelly, even when frustrated. Because..." He trailed off, focusing intently on securing the stretcher. Because I've loved you since I was 14 years old," he finished quietly. Kestra's breath caught. In all her 24 years, surrounded by suitors and admirers, no one had ever spoken to her with such honest vulnerability. The stable boy she'd overlooked had been harboring feelings deeper than any of her noble courtiers had ever expressed. The journey to the caves was agonizing. Every jolt sent fire through her spine, but Finn's steady pace and quiet reassurances helped her endure. He had chosen a route that avoided main roads, clearly anticipating that they might be pursued by the enemy forces that had set the trap. As they traveled, he spoke softly of practical matters: where they could find water, which plants might help with pain, how to set snares for game. Kestra realized with growing amazement that the servant she'd dismissed as simple possessed knowledge that might well save both their lives. The cave he'd chosen was perfect, hidden behind a waterfall, defensible, with multiple exits, as he made her as comfortable as possible on a bed of soft moss and his own cloak. Kestra felt a strange warmth building in her chest despite her desperate circumstances. "You planned this," she accused gently. "You knew exactly where to bring me." Finn's cheeks reddened again. "I used to imagine scenarios where I might rescue you. I scouted hiding places, learned which plants were medicinal, It was foolish. I know, a stable boy dreaming of saving a princess. Not foolish, Kestra said softly, prophetic. As night fell and Finn built a small fire deeper in the cave to avoid detection, Kestra watched him move with quiet efficiency. Every action was purposeful, born of careful thought and genuine care. When he knelt beside her to check her injuries, his touch was gentle but sure. I need to examine your legs, he said hesitantly, to see how badly they're injured. She nodded, though the thought of anyone seeing her in such a vulnerable state, especially this young man, whose confession had stirred something unexpected in her heart, made her flush with embarrassment. His examination was clinical, respectful. Though she caught him stealing glances at her face to gauge her pain, the bones seem intact. He reported, but there's swelling around your spine. We need to reduce the inflammation. How do you know such things? Kestra asked, genuinely curious. My mother was the castle's herb woman before she died, Finn explained, gathering materials for a poultice. I learned from her before I was old enough to work the stables. And horses get injured too. I've treated everything from strained tendons to broken bones. As he worked, mixing herbs with practiced skill, Kestra found herself truly seeing him for the first time. The boy she'd overlooked possessed depths she'd never imagined. His hands were scarred from years of hard work, but they moved with the precision of a trained healer. His knowledge encompassed far more than stable management. Finn, she said, as he applied the cool poultice to her back, why didn't you ever speak to me before? All these years, he was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he said, what would I have said? Your Highness, the stable boy loves you. You would have laughed, or worse, had me whipped for presumption. I might have, she admitted, shame coloring her voice. I was proud, arrogant. You were magnificent, he corrected gently. You still are. This doesn't change who you are, Princess Kestra. You're still the woman who could outfight any knight in the kingdom, who spoke 7 languages, who never backed down from a challenge. Tears she'd been holding back finally spilled over. I can't even stand, Finn. How can I be any of those things? Now, he moved to sit beside her, close enough that his warmth chased away the cave's chill. Strength isn't just in your legs, Your Highness. It's in your heart, your mind, your spirit. Those are still whole. In the flickering firelight, with pain medication beginning to dull her agony, Kestra saw something in Finn's eyes that she'd never recognized before, not just love, but faith. Complete, unwavering belief in her worth despite her current helplessness. For the first time since awakening on the battlefield, she began to hope that perhaps she wasn't as broken as she feared. 3 days in the cave had taught Kestra more about helplessness than 24 years of privilege ever could. Simple tasks she'd never considered, bathing, eating, even relieving herself, now required Finn's assistance. Each act of dependence chipped away at her. Pride like water wearing down stone. I can manage that myself, she snapped as Finn approached with a bowl of heated water and clean cloth strips torn from his spare shirt. Of course you can, Your Highness, he replied with maddening patience, but you'll reopen the wounds on your back trying to reach them. Please, let me help. The gentleness in his voice only made her humiliation worse. She who had commanded armies now couldn't even wash her own back without assistance. This is intolerable. I should have died on that battlefield with some dignity intact. Finn's hands stilled on the cloth. Don't say that. Please. Why not? It's true. What use is a crippled princess to anyone? You're not crippled, he said, firmly, resuming his careful cleaning of her injuries. You're healing. There's a difference. Kestra wanted to argue, but something in his tone stopped her. Over the past days, she'd begun to notice things about Finn that her previous arrogance had blinded her to. The way he rationed their meager supplies to ensure she ate first. How he'd given her his only blanket while he slept by the dying fire. The dark circles under his eyes, from staying awake to tend her through fever dreams. You're exhausting yourself, she observed as he checked the poultice on her spine. When did you last sleep properly? I'm fine, he deflected, but she caught the slight tremor in his hands from fatigue. Finn. She waited until he met her eyes. Sleep. That's a royal command. A smile ghosted across his lips. As you wish, Your Highness. But even as he settled beside the fire, She saw how his eyes kept drifting back to her, ensuring she was comfortable. The realization that someone cared for her welfare with such devotion was both humbling and terrifying. Their fragile peace shattered the next morning, when voices echoed from outside the waterfall. Finn was instantly alert, pressing a finger to his lips as he crept toward the cave entrance. His face went pale as he listened. "Bandits," he whispered, returning to her side. "At least 4 of them. They're tracking something. Tracking us." Before he could answer, a rough voice boomed from outside. "We know you're in there. Come out peaceful-like, and nobody gets hurt." Finn's jaw clenched with determination. "Stay quiet. I'll handle this." "You'll handle for armed bandits," Kestra hissed. "You're a stable boy, not a warrior. Trust me," he said simply, then called out, "Just a moment. My wife is indisposed." Kestra's eyebrows shot up at the deception, but she recognized the wisdom in it. A married couple would seem less suspicious than a princess and her servant. "Hurry up," the voice demanded. "We ain't got all day." Finn quickly gathered their supplies, then helped Kestra into a sitting position against the cave wall. "Follow my lead," he murmured, then louder, "Coming out now." 3 men emerged from behind the waterfall as Finn stepped into view, hands raised. The 4th remained hidden, a smart tactical decision that Kestra grudgingly respected. Their leader was a bear of a man with scars crisscrossing his face and arms like a map of violence. Well, the leader, Gareth, grinned, revealing rotted teeth. "What have we here? A pretty boy and his woman hiding in caves like rabbits." "We're just travelers," Finn said calmly. "My wife took ill, so we stopped to rest." "Travelers, eh?" Gareth's eyes glittered with cruel amusement. "Funny thing about travelers, they usually carry coin." "Empty your pockets, boy." Finn slowly reached into his clothing, producing a small leather pouch. "This is all we have." Gareth snatched the pouch and counted the meager contents. 5 copper pieces, that's all." His voice turned dangerous. "You're lying. Nobody travels these parts without proper funds unless they're running from something." "We lost most of our belongings in a river crossing," Finn replied steadily. The current was stronger than expected. One of the other bandits, a weary man with nervous eyes, stepped closer to the cave entrance. "Boss, maybe we should check inside. See what else they might be hiding." Kestra's heart raced as footsteps approached. If they discovered her identity, the ransom demands would follow quickly. But Finn moved with surprising speed, positioning himself between the bandit and the cave. "My wife has the fever pox," he said quickly. "Highly contagious. I wouldn't get too close if I were you." The nervous bandit stopped dead in his tracks. "Fever pox, you sure about that?" "Quite sure." Finn nodded gravely. "That's why we're hiding out here instead of seeking help in town. Can't risk spreading it." Gareth's expression shifted to one of calculation rather than immediate concern. "Fever pox, you say? That's a death sentence for most folk." He studied Finn with renewed interest. "You don't look sick, boy. I had it as a child. Leaves you immune." Finn's lie was smooth, delivered with just enough detail to be believable. "Boss," the nervous bandit whispered urgently, "maybe we should just take what they got and leave. Fever pox ain't nothing to mess with." But Gareth was too experienced to be easily fooled. "Here's what I think happened," he said, circling Finn like a predator. "I think you two are worth more than 5 copper pieces. I think maybe someone's looking for you. Someone with deep pockets." Kestra could see Finn's muscles tense, preparing for violence. From her position inside the cave, she wished desperately for her sword, her strength, anything that could help him. Instead, she was forced to watch as the man who'd sacrificed everything for her faced deadly danger. "Alone, you've got quite an imagination," Finn said, though sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool air. "Do I?" Gareth smiled coldly. "Strip." "What? You heard me. Strip. If you're just common travelers, you won't mind showing us you're not hiding anything valuable. Jewelry, perhaps, or maybe some identifying marks that might tell us who you really are." Finn's hesitation was answer enough. Gareth's grin widened as he drew a wicked-looking dagger. "I thought so. Boys, it looks like we've caught ourselves some very interesting fish." The situation was deteriorating rapidly. Kestra could see Finn calculating odds, measuring distances. preparing for what might be his final act of protecting her. The devotion in his stance, the way he positioned himself as an unbreachable wall between her and danger, stirred something fierce in her chest. Then inspiration struck. If Finn could lie convincingly, so could she. "Finn," she called weakly, from inside the cave, injecting her voice with pain and delirium. "Finn, the baby. Something's wrong with the baby." The effect was immediate. Even hardened bandits had some boundaries, and a pregnant woman in distress was apparently one of them. The nervous bandit actually took a step backward. Baby Gareth's confidence wavered slightly. "Please," Kestra continued, her voice breaking with perfectly feigned desperation. "The fever, I think I'm losing the baby. Please, I need help." Finn caught on immediately. "The nearest healer is 2 days' ride," he said, turning toward the cave with apparent anguish. "At this rate, I'll lose them both for a moment, even." Gareth seemed uncertain. Then greed reasserted itself. "Nice try," he snarled. But his words were cut off as Finn suddenly dove sideways, scooping up a handful of cave sand and flinging it into the bandit leader's eyes. In the same motion, he grabbed a heavy stone and brought it down on the nearest bandit's skull with a sickening crack. "Run," he shouted toward the cave, though they both knew she couldn't. The fight that followed was brief but vicious. Finn moved with a desperation born of love, using every dirty trick and advantage the terrain provided. But he was still one man against 3, and the outcome was inevitable. When the dust settled, Finn lay bleeding from a head wound while Gareth held his dagger to the young man's throat. "Very impressive," Gareth panted, "but ultimately futile. Now, let's discuss what you're really worth to us." From inside the cave, Kestra closed her eyes and tried to think of a way to save the man who had already saved her in every way that mattered. The standoff stretched like a taut bowstring. Gareth's blade pressed against Finn's throat while his remaining companions flanked the cave entrance. Blood trickled from a gash above Finn's left eye, but his gaze remained fixed on the darkness, where Kestra waited. "Here's how this works," Gareth announced, his voice echoing off the rock walls. "You're going to tell me exactly who you are, or I start cutting pieces off your husband until you do." Kestra's mind raced. Her royal training had included strategy sessions, but those had never covered being paralyzed in a cave while the man she was beginning to love faced torture on her behalf. Every instinct screamed at her to surrender, to trade her freedom for his safety. "I'm nobody special," she called out, modulating her voice to sound weak and frightened. "Just a merchant's daughter. My father deals in grain, nothing more. A merchant's daughter who travels with a stable boy." Gareth's laugh was harsh. "Try again." "Sweetheart, he's not a stable boy," Kestra replied quickly, building the lie as she spoke. "He's my husband. We eloped against my father's wishes. We have nothing of value because we took only what we could carry when we fled." Finn caught her meaning immediately. Her father wanted her to marry his business partner. He added, his voice strained but steady despite the blade at his throat. "A man old enough to be her grandfather. We chose love over gold." The nervous bandit shifted uncomfortably. "Boss, maybe they're telling the truth. Why else would they be hiding in caves instead of staying at proper inns?" "Because," Gareth snarled, "they're lying through their teeth. Look at his hands, you fool. Those aren't the hands of a grain merchant's son-in-law. Those are working hands, stable hands. Unless I miss my guess." Kestra's heart sank. Of course Gareth would notice the details that marked Finn's true profession. These men survived by reading people, by spotting deception and weakness. "My father made him work in the stables," she said desperately, "as punishment for courting me. He thought hard labor would break Finn's spirit and send him away." "Clever," Gareth admitted, "but not clever enough. You see, there's something about your voice. Girl, you speak like nobility, even when you're trying not to. All cultured and proper. That's not something a merchant's daughter picks up selling grain." The game was up, and they all knew it. Kestra could see defeat settling into Finn's shoulders, though his eyes still blazed with protective fury. Then she heard it, a sound so faint the bandits missed it entirely. The soft scrape of leather against stone, coming from the rear of the cave system. Someone was approaching through the back passages. Hope flared in her chest until she realized the newcomers might be more bandits, or worse, but then a familiar Voice whispered from the shadows behind her. Princess, is that truly you? Kestra nearly sobbed with relief. Mira, the village healer, emerged from the darkness, accompanied by two men Kestra didn't recognize. Mira was small and weathered, with silver-streaked hair and hands stained green from years of working with herbs. More importantly, she was clever, brave, and owed no loyalty to anyone but her patients. I heard the commotion from my herb gathering, Mira whispered, assessing the situation quickly. Back entrance to these caves opens near my favorite mushroom patch. Her eyes took in Kestra's paralyzed legs, Finn's predicament, and the bandits outside with professional efficiency. How badly are you hurt, child? Spine injury. Can't feel my legs. But Mira, they have Finn. I can see that. The older woman's expression hardened. And I can see these caves have more than one exit. Can you be moved? Yes, but I won't leave him. Mira studied her with knowing eyes. Love makes us do foolish things. Lucky for you. I've always been fond of foolishness. She turned to her companions. Jorik, Tam, remember what I taught you about cave acoustics? The two men nodded grimly. One was clearly a woodsman, all lean muscle and quiet confidence. The other bore the scars of old battles, though he wore no uniform or insignia. Princess, Mira continued, I need you to create a distraction. Something to draw their attention while we position ourselves. What kind of distraction? The kind only royalty can provide. Time to remind these fools exactly who they're threatening. Understanding. Dawned, Kestra took a deep breath, drawing on years of court training and battlefield command. When she spoke again, her voice carried the full weight of royal authority. Release him. Now. The change was electric. Gone was the frightened merchant's daughter, replaced by someone who expected instant obedience. The power in her voice made even the bandits hesitate. That's better, Gareth said, though uncertainty flickered in his eyes. Finally ready to tell the truth. I am Princess Kestra of House Valdris, she announced, each word ringing like a bell. Third in line to the throne, Knight Commander of the Eastern Marches, and daughter of King Aldrich the Just, you will release my protector immediately, or face the consequences of harming royalty. The revelation hit the bandits like a physical blow. Even hardened criminals understood the difference between robbing travelers and kidnapping princesses. The nervous bandit actually took several steps backward. Princess, he stammered. Boss, we can't. They'll hunt us to the ends of the earth if we shut up, Gareth snapped. But his confidence was cracking. The blade at Finn's throat trembled slightly. Princess or not, she's still worth a fortune in ransom. You're assuming you'll live long enough to collect, came a new voice from the shadows. Jorik materialized behind the third bandit like a ghost, a hunter's knife pressed to the man's spine. Simultaneously, Tam appeared at the cave mouth, blocking the exit with a crossbow aimed at Gareth's heart. Interesting position you're in, Mira observed conversationally as she emerged into the open. 3 of you, 3 of us, but we have the advantage of knowing these caves intimately. You're bluffing, Gareth snarled, though his grip on the dagger had loosened. Old woman and to peasants against seasoned fighters, Tam smiled coldly. Former royal guard. Actually, served Princess Kestra's father for 15 years before I retired to hunt poachers. As for being seasoned, his crossbow bolt took the nervous bandit through the shoulder, spinning him around and sending him crashing to the ground. I'd say that's seasoned enough. The distraction was all Finn needed. He twisted away from Gareth's blade, rolling behind a boulder as chaos erupted. The remaining bandits found themselves outmaneuvered, outflanked, and facing opponents who knew the terrain far better than they did. When the brief, violent skirmish ended, Gareth lay unconscious with a lump on his skull courtesy of Jorik's club. The nervous bandit clutched his wounded shoulder while his companion nursed a broken nose. From Tam's crossbow stock, tie them up, Mira ordered briskly. We'll deliver them to the nearest garrison for the bounty. Murder and attempted kidnapping of royalty should fetch a tidy sum. But Kestra's attention was focused entirely on Finn as he limped back to her side. Blood still trickling from his head wound. You're hurt, she said, reaching up to touch his face with trembling fingers. I'm alive, he replied, catching her hand and pressing it to his cheek. Thanks to you. That royal voice of yours probably saved us all. Thanks to all of us, Kestra corrected, looking around at their unlikely rescue party. Mira, how did you know to find me here? The healer settled beside them, already opening her bag of supplies. Word travels fast in small villages, Your Highness. When soldiers came through asking about battlefield survivors, then left without searching properly. I suspected something was amiss. Been checking all the likely hiding spots for days. Soldiers came looking for me, but not the right kind of soldiers, if you take my meaning. Mira's hands were gentle as she examined Kestra's back. These bore your sister's colors, not your father's. Seemed more interested in confirming your death than ensuring your rescue. The implication hit like a cold wind. Valdris thinks I'm dead, or wants you to be, Tam said grimly, securing the last of the prisoners. Politics have gotten ugly since news of your disappearance reached court. Kestra felt Finn's hand tighten around hers. The simple contact anchored her as the full magnitude of their situation became clear. She wasn't just injured and helpless, she was potentially hunted by her own family. Can you help her walk again? Finn asked Mira urgently. The healer's examination was thorough and gentle. When she finished, her expression was cautiously optimistic. The swelling is going down, which is excellent. Feeling returning to her legs would be even better. Has there been any sensation at all? Some tingling, Kestra admitted. Yesterday I thought I felt pressure when Finn touched my foot, but I wasn't certain. That's very promising. The damage isn't complete. Mira began, mixing herbs in a small bowl. This will help reduce inflammation further. But the real healing will take time and work. Lots of work. Then we'll work, Finn said simply. Whatever it takes. Mira smiled at the devotion in his voice. Good. She'll need that determination. Both of you will. Her expression grew serious as she looked between them. But first, we need to get you somewhere safe. If your sister's people are hunting you, this cave won't remain secret for long. As they made preparations to move, Kestra realized that her world had fundamentally shifted. The princess who had fallen into that trap no longer existed. In her place was someone who had learned to depend on others, to trust in love rather than power, and to fight for what mattered most. The woman emerging from this cave would be very different from the one who had entered it. And looking at Finn's determined expression as he prepared to carry her toward an uncertain future, she found herself eager to discover who that new woman might become. The village of Millbrook had seen better decades. Nestled in a valley between rolling hills, it survived on sheep farming and the occasional trade caravan that took the winding mountain route to avoid the main highways. For a princess in hiding, it was perfect, isolated enough to avoid attention, but prosperous enough to support a skilled healer like Mira. The cottage Mira provided sat at the village's edge, surrounded by herb gardens and protected by ancient oak trees. It had been her grandmother's home, she explained, unused since the old woman's death 5 years prior. The main room was large enough for Kestra's rehabilitation, while the loft provided privacy for the sleeping arrangements that had become wonderfully complicated. The feeling is definitely returning, Mira announced after her morning examination. 2 weeks after their arrival. Can you wiggle your toes on command now? Kestra concentrated and was rewarded by the sight of her right foot moving slightly. The achievement that would have seemed pathetic to her former self now felt like conquering kingdoms. Both feet, she said with pride, demonstrating, excellent. And the pain, less sharp, more like awareness. I know my legs are there again. Finn looked up from the strengthening exercises Mira had taught him, his face bright with hope. Over the past weeks, he had transformed from stable boy to dedicated physical therapist, learning massage techniques, stretching routines, and muscle manipulation with the same focus he'd once applied to horse care. That means we can begin the next phase, Mira said, actual movement exercises. But first, she fixed Kestra with a stern look. We need to discuss your emotional healing as well as your physical recovery. My emotions are fine, Kestra replied automatically. Are they? You've barely spoken about what happened during the battle, or your fears about the future. You've focused entirely on your legs, as if healing them will solve everything else. Kestra felt exposed under the healer's knowing gaze. My legs are the problem. Everything else is secondary, is it? Mira challenged. What about the fact that Your own sister may have orchestrated your supposed death. What about your feelings for Finn, which you've been dancing around for weeks? What about your terror that even if you regain the ability to walk, you'll never be the warrior you once were? The accuracy of Mira's observations hit like physical blows. Kestra found herself looking anywhere but at the two people who had become her world. I don't know how to be anything other than what I was, she admitted finally. If I'm not the warrior princess, then who am I? Maybe, Finn said softly, moving to sit beside her on the low bed. You're someone better. Better. I'm helpless. I can't even stand without support. You coordinated our rescue from armed bandits while paralyzed. He pointed out, you've learned more about herb lore in 2 weeks than most people absorb in years. You've shown more patience with your recovery than anyone expected, including yourself. How is any of that helpless? Mira nodded approvingly. Finn's right. You've been so focused on what you've lost that you haven't noticed what you've gained, such as humility, compassion, the ability to accept help gracefully, the wisdom to see people's true worth rather than just their social position. Mira's smile was gentle. The Princess Kestra, who was carried into this cottage, would never have spent 3 hours yesterday helping young Willem with his letters. She wouldn't have listened to Goodwife Martha's troubles with her arthritic hands, or offered practical advice for improving crop rotation to the village council. Those are small things, Kestra protested. Small things that touched every life. In this village, Finn said, they speak of you differently now, not as some distant royal figure, but as someone who cares about their daily struggles. The conversation was interrupted by a commotion outside. Through the window, they could see riders approaching 6 mounted figures in gleaming armor bearing the royal colors. Kestra's heart leaped with hope until she noticed the specific heraldry on their banners. That's Captain Roderick, she breathed. He served under me in the Eastern Marches. But something felt wrong. Roderick's approach was too cautious, too formal for a joyful reunion. As the riders drew closer, Kestra caught sight of their faces and her blood chilled. Finn, help me to the window, she commanded urgently. Supported by his strong arms, she was able to stand long enough to get a clear view of the approaching party. What she saw confirmed her worst fears. They're not here to rescue me, she said grimly. Look at their formation. That's a containment pattern, not an escort. And Roderick's expression. She sank back onto the bed, mind racing. They're here to capture me, not save me. Are you certain? Mira asked, already moving to gather essential supplies with practiced efficiency. Positive. That's a search and detain formation. I taught it to them myself. Bitter irony colored her voice. The question is whether they're acting on Valdris's orders or someone else's. Finn was already helping her into traveling clothes, his movements quick but gentle. Does it matter? Either way, we need to leave. Wait, Kestra said, catching his hand. Where can we go? I can barely walk, let alone run. And they'll track us easily. Not if they think you're not here, Mira said with a calculating gleam in her eyes. How well do you trust me, Your Highness, with my life? Why? Because I'm about to ask you to do something that goes against every instinct you have as royalty. I need you to let them think you're dead. The plan was insane, desperate, and absolutely brilliant. While Finn helped Kestra into the hidden root cellar beneath the cottage, a space just large enough for the people to lie concealed, Mira prepared for the performance of her lifetime. By the time Captain Roderick knocked on her door, the healer had transformed herself into a woman bearing tragic news. Captain, she said, opening the door with appropriately red-rimmed eyes, I feared this day would come. Good woman Mira, Roderick replied formally. We seek word of Princess Kestra. There are reports she may have survived the battle at Thornfield Gap. She did survive initially, Mira said, her voice heavy with manufactured grief. A young man brought her here, more dead than alive. Her spine was shattered, her legs crushed. I did what I could, but the internal injuries were too severe. She lasted for days before the fever took her. I'm sorry, Captain. I know you served her faithfully. Roderick's face remained carefully neutral. But Kestra could hear voices from the cellar. His men were searching the cottage above them. This young man who brought her, Roderick continued. Where is he now? Fled the same night she died. Blamed himself for not getting her to safety sooner. Haven't seen him since. You buried her. According to her final wishes, yes. A simple grave in the village cemetery, unmarked to prevent desecration by her enemies. There was a long pause, then Roderick's voice, carefully casual. You wouldn't mind showing us this grave, would you? Mira's reply was perfect in its indignation. Mind? Captain, I've tended that grave daily for over a week, keeping it clean and leaving flowers as befits a princess. Of course I'll show you. In the cramped root cellar, Kestra felt Finn's hand squeeze hers reassuringly. Above them, footsteps moved around the cottage, searching every room, every hiding place except the one they occupied. The cellar's been sealed for years, they heard Mira say dismissively. Flooding made it unusable. Nothing down there but rot and rats. Search it anyway, Roderick ordered. Kestra's heart hammered as heavy footsteps approached the hidden entrance. But Mira had been thorough. The concealed door looked like nothing more than warped floorboards, complete with strategically placed furniture and decades of accumulated dust. Just rats, Captain, one of the soldiers reported, and the smell's terrible. Been flooded recently by the look of it. After what felt like hours, the search party departed to examine the grave. Mira had prepared with a sheep's bones and appropriate prayers. Only when their hoofbeats had faded completely did she lift the hidden door. That was closer than I'd like, she admitted, helping them climb out. But it worked. They'll report you officially dead now, giving us freedom to move, Kestra realized. But Captain Roderick isn't stupid. If he has doubts, he'll keep them to himself. Finn said with certainty. I saw his face when Mira described your death. He was relieved. Relieved. Think about it. If you're alive, he has to choose between loyalty to you and orders from whoever sent him. This way, he can report mission accomplished and sleep peacefully. Kestra absorbed this analysis of her former officer's character. The old her would have been outraged by such disloyalty. The new her understood the impossible position Roderick had been placed in. So what now? She asked. We can't stay here. They might come back. And I'm still barely mobile. Now, Mira said with satisfaction. We implement the second part of my plan. There's someone you need to meet. That evening, as Kestra practiced walking with her strengthened legs and Finn prepared their evening meal, Mira returned with a visitor. The woman who entered was roughly Kestra's age, with intelligent dark eyes and calloused hands that spoke of hard work. Your Highness, Mira said formally, may I present Dame Rivka of the Thornwood? Dame Rivka, this is the princess I told you about. Rivka bowed respectfully, but her expression was assessing rather than awed. The famous warrior princess. I've heard much about your exploits. None of it likely true anymore. Kestra replied ruefully. I understand you have information about my sister's activities. More than information, I have proof. Rivka's voice hardened. Queen Valdris didn't just fail to search for you adequately. She actively hindered rescue efforts. 3 separate parties tried to organize search missions. All were reassigned to other duties or had their funding mysteriously withdrawn. The betrayal, though expected, still cut deep. Why? Because your survival threatens her newly claimed authority. With you presumed dead, she's consolidated power remarkably quickly. Your father grows weaker each day, and rumors suggest his illness isn't entirely natural. Kestra felt the world shift beneath her. You're suggesting she's poisoning our father? I'm stating it as fact. I have witnesses, including servants, who've observed the progression of his symptoms. It's slow, subtle, designed to look like natural decline, but the pattern is unmistakable to anyone who knows what to look for. Finn moved protectively closer to Kestra as her face went pale. What do you need from us? He asked Rivka directly. Your princess is the only legitimate heir with both the bloodline and the support necessary to challenge Valdris. But she needs to be able to fight literally and figuratively. I can barely walk, Kestra pointed out. Walking isn't the only form of strength, Rivka replied. I know 15 knights who would follow you into battle crawling if necessary. Your reputation for justice and mercy inspired fierce loyalty. That hasn't changed. But I have changed. I'm not the same person who left for that battle. No, Rivka agreed. Studying her carefully, you're better. The Princess Kestra of old was magnificent but distant. This woman who spent 3 hours teaching a peasant boy to read. who listens to villagers' problems with genuine interest, who clearly loves and is loved in return. She glanced meaningfully at Finn. This woman could unite a kingdom, not just command it. That night, as they lay together in the cottage's single-bed sleeping arrangement that had evolved naturally, from necessity to choice, Kestra voiced the fear that had been growing in her heart. "What if I'm not strong enough?" she whispered into the darkness. "What if my body heals, but I'm still not the warrior I was?" Finn's arms tightened around her. "Then you'll be a different kind of warrior, the kind who fights with wisdom instead of just strength, the kind who builds bridges instead of just tearing down walls. You have such faith in me." "I have faith in us," he corrected, pressing a gentle kiss to her temple. "Whatever comes next, we face it together." Outside, night wind rustled through the oak trees, carrying the promise of change. Tomorrow, they would begin planning their return to a world that believed Princess Kestra dead. But tonight, in the safety of each other's arms, they were simply two people who had found something worth fighting for. In the wreckage of their old lives, the paralyzed princess was gone forever. In her place lay a woman who had learned that true strength came not from what you could do alone, but from whom you chose to trust with your vulnerabilities. And as Finn's breathing steadied into sleep beside her, Kestra smiled into the darkness, finally understanding who she was meant to become. 6 months after the world had pronounced her dead, Princess Kestra stood in the shadows of her father's castle, watching her own funeral being commemorated. Queen Valdris, resplendent in mourning black that somehow made her look more regal than grieving, delivered a speech about her beloved sister's tragic loss to the assembled nobles. "The kingdom mourns," Valdris declared, her voice carrying across the courtyard, "but we must look forward. In honor of Princess Kestra's memory, I pledge to continue her work of expanding our borders and strengthening our military." Kestra's jaw clenched. Her work had been about protecting their people, not conquest. But then Finn's hand found hers in the darkness of the servants' corridor they'd used to infiltrate the castle, and his steady presence reminded her to stay focused on their mission. "The timing has to be perfect," Dame Rivka whispered from behind them. The past months had seen their small group grow into a network of loyalist knights who'd served under Kestra, nobles who'd grown suspicious of Valdris's rapid rise to power, and common folk who remembered the princess's fairness. "Your cousin Tomas will challenge her claim during the ceremony. That's when you make your entrance. And if the guards don't believe I'm really alive," Kestra asked, adjusting the royal circlet she'd worn into exile. Her legs were strong now, thanks to months of Mira's treatments and Finn's devoted assistance, though she still carried a walking stick, partly for residual support, partly because it concealed a blade. "They will," Finn said with quiet confidence. "You look every inch the princess again." He was right, though the woman who would soon emerge from hiding bore little resemblance to the arrogant warrior who